Hey everyone, and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to identify an economic moat. And of course, as a part of how to identify an economic moat, I need to first talk about what is an economic moat and why it's so important that we need to identify at least one of these things in businesses when we're looking to make an investment. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the 5 major types of economic moats that you will most commonly come across. And then towards the end of the video, we're going to talk about the 2-step process that you should be going through in order to objectively identify an economic moat or a competitive advantage within a business. So if you do enjoy today's video, as always, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, all of that good stuff. But for now, let's jump into it. Identifying an economic moat is an essential part of the analysis process when we're looking to make an investment. So what is an economic moat? Well, an economic moat is simply a distinct competitive advantage. It's something about a particular business that gives it an advantage over the other businesses in its industry. And the reason why it's called an economic moat, I think Warren Buffett coined this term, or maybe it was Benjamin Graham, but the analogy that they're drawing is a moat that is around a castle. A castle, you can imagine, has a big, deep trench around it, also called a moat, filled with water, and it protects that castle from invasion from other people, I guess. I don't know. But essentially, it's an intrinsic layer of protection around the castle, and that is the analogy we use when we're talking about businesses. We're talking about an economic kind of moat, something in the economies of the business that gives it a distinct advantage. And really what this means is that we're trying to look for businesses that have a product or service that is a no-brainer for customers, that when a customer comes into a particular market, the smartphone market, or they're looking to get some kind of service, we want to find the business that the customer immediately goes towards because it's the obvious choice. And really, ultimately, the businesses that have wide economic moats, distinct competitive advantages over the other businesses, will be able to thrive on the stock market and thrive as a business in general over the long term. And that is what we're trying to identify. We want to invest in businesses that have a high chance of being sustainable over the very long term. And as a result, that means we can only invest in businesses that have that intrinsic layer of protection around them. And when it comes to competitive advantages, there are many different forms that a competitive advantage could take its place. And this is, of course, going to differ from industry to industry. However, there are 5 major types of economic moats, types of competitive advantages that you will see prop up over and over again. And it's important to talk about these because when you're initially starting to learn how to analyze businesses, to identify these competitive advantages can be quite tricky. And having a list of the 5 major ones where you can look at it and see if any of them fit with the business you're looking at is super valuable. So let's get into it and talk about the first major competitive advantage or major economic moat, which is a networking effect. A networking effect occurs when a business's product or service gets more valuable as more people use that product or service. So as more people are using it, it becomes more valuable, and then as a result of it becoming more valuable, more people are interested in using it. And it's kind of this flywheel effect, or sometimes called a positive feedback loop. If you've ever heard someone put the microphone close to the speaker, you know that the speaker is feeding into the microphone, which is feeding back into the speaker, and it gets louder and louder and louder until it just screeches. That's kind of a flywheel, a positive feedback loop, and that is the exact same thing as what a networking effect is. And one very distinct and obvious example that I could give you for this is with Google's YouTube platform. So you can imagine when YouTube just started out in 2005 or 6 or whenever it started, you can imagine that there wasn't really any video content on there, right? There was maybe a few videos that people were chucking up, a couple of people were using it to find information, but really the value of the service was really lacking. But over time, what happened was more people started uploading content to the platform. Content creators like myself started uploading more content. And as a result of there being more content on the platform, the value of the platform for finding information became stronger. And as a result, more users came onto the platform. And because there was more users searching for videos, content creators like myself realized that we could then access more people if we posted more content. So we continue to post more content. And it is the exact same effect as the microphone next to the speaker in that more people are creating content, makes it more valuable, more people come onto the platform, and then as a result, more people create more content. And it's this flywheel effect of value that has been created on the YouTube platform. And the outcome of what has happened with YouTube is that YouTube has no competition in sight. They dominate the marketplace, and in terms of users, they reach approximately 1.5 billion monthly active users, which is insane. And that is a great example of a perfectly executed networking effect. The second major type of economic moat is what's called an intangible asset moat, or an intangible competitive advantage. And this is where a business has some kind of non-physical asset, some kind of non-physical attribute that is giving them an advantage. And this non-physical asset could take its form in many different ways. It could be the value of the brand of that business. It could be the value of some kind of intellectual property or some patents or trademarks or something like that. But if we want to just continue on with our Google example, we can hone in on Google's search engine to talk about this intangible moat, because when you go to search something on the internet, you immediately go to Google. And why is that? Well, it's because Google has a strong and long reputation of being able to provide you the information you want very easily when you go and search for it. So that they've built a brand around their search engine, and has actually gotten so powerful that whenever people are searching on the internet for anything, they don't say, I'm going to internet search it, or I'm going to look that up on the internet. Most people say they're going to Google it. They say the name of the brand in the action. It's kind of become a verb of what they're doing on the internet. And that is super powerful. And that is definitely a distinct advantage that they have over other businesses in that industry. If people are saying, oh, can you Google that for me? Is there any chance that that person's going to go on Bing or on Yahoo search, if that even exists anymore? I don't know if it does anymore, but no, everyone is going immediately to Google, and that is a distinct competitive advantage. The third major type of economic moat is a switching cost advantage. So what does that mean? Well, it's when a business's products or services lock a customer in to the point where if they were to switch to a competing product or service, it would be too expensive to the point where it's not worth leaving. And a great example of this is Adobe and their Creative Suite. So many businesses and individuals such as myself, but many businesses use Photoshop and Premiere Pro and After Effects and all of those video and photo editing softwares that Adobe provides. And Adobe has progressively increased their prices. They switched it over to a subscription model, so you can't just buy 1 year's worth and then not buy it for a few years. You have to stay on the subscription if you want to be using it. And as a result, it's become progressively more and more expensive for businesses to use Adobe. But why do businesses not switch? Well, if they were to switch to, say, Apple's video and photo editing software or some other kind of business, then they would have to retrain all of their staff to use a different video or photo editing software. And that is a huge cost. It's not just the cost of Adobe subscription of $100 per month versus $80 per month. That's not the only cost that is associated. There's the cost of having to hire new staff, hire trainers, or even just to train the people who work in your business at the moment to use that new software, as well as the lost efficiency while they're learning to use that new software. So that is a powerful competitive advantage, and it means that many businesses and individuals are locked into using Adobe's products. And I've personally experienced this firsthand. So when I first subscribed to the Adobe Creative Cloud, I was a student, so I was able to get on at a substantial discount. And then since then, I no longer have the student discount, and the price has gone up massively. And there are many alternative video editing softwares that I could use to create these videos that are much cheaper, but I really don't want to switch because I know how many hours I've put in to learning how to use Premiere and learning how to use Photoshop. So for that reason, I'm probably going to stay with Adobe no matter how high they put the price, unless they do something ridiculous. And that, for me, just shows me, at least personally, that that is the power of Adobe's business right there. The fourth major type of competitive advantage is called a cost advantage, or sometimes this is called economies of scale. And this is where a business has such a large position in the market that they have some kind of cost advantage. Maybe it means that they can supply raw materials at a cheaper price, or it might mean that they can adapt to changes in demand, supply and demand much more quickly than their smaller businesses, smaller competitors. And a great example of this is Thor Industries, one of the businesses that I am invested in. And Thor Industries in the US specifically has 50% market share of all RVs. So they control vastly more cash flow than all of the other businesses in the industry, and that comes with a few cost advantages. The first is that they have relationships with the best steel and aluminium suppliers. So they can get steel and aluminium to make their RVs cheaper than anyone else in the marketplace. And how can they do that? Well, they're buying in the most bulk. Because they are 50% of the market, they are the RV manufacturer that is buying the most steel and aluminium out of all of the businesses, and as a result, they can get a cheaper price when they're ordering their steel and aluminium. And then the other advantage is that because of their large size and their ability and their cash flows that they're generating, they are able to quickly adapt to changes in demand. So if there is a quick spike in the demand for RVs, they can quickly use their cash reserves on their balance sheet, as well as the cash generated on a day-to-day basis, to quickly open up a new manufacturing center and meet that demand. So when the retailers, when the dealerships are saying we need more RVs, Thor Industries can quickly produce more in a short period of time. And the same is true on the downside. If there's a sudden drop off in demand, they're able to quickly and efficiently reduce the size of their manufacturing processes because of the extra cash flows that they have. And this is what sort of kills many of the smaller RV businesses in the market, is that they take on too much debt to meet the demand of to meet increased demand, and then demand sort of drops off and they don't have any money in order to bring their operations into a smaller, more efficient scale. And as a result, they have too much debt. They have all of these factories running that they're not making RVs for, and they get really hurt. But a big player like Thor Industries is able to adapt to those changes. And of course, as I mentioned, they have that steel and aluminium supplier advantage. And the fifth and final major type of economic moat that we're going to talk about today is what's called a toll moat. And the analogy that's being drawn here is your classic toll bridge kind of situation. If you're at point A and you want to get to point B, and in the middle of that is a toll booth where you have to pay a little fee, then you are going to pay that fee in order to get to point B. And that is really what we're talking about here. It's where a business has something that the customer needs, and only that business can supply what that customer needs. So they have to go through that business. And a quick example of this would be looking at Netflix and their original content. So there's some movies on Netflix that are available elsewhere, so you can price match if you want. You can either have a Netflix subscription or maybe a Foxtel subscription or a HBO or whatever it is, or you can just rent the movie individually. But when it comes to Netflix originals, movies that are only exclusively available on the Netflix platform, you have to subscribe to Netflix in order to get access to that. And that is a toll moat. If the customer wants to watch whatever it is, Riverdale, 13 Reasons Why, I don't even know what's on Netflix originals these days, but if they want to watch it, they have to subscribe to Netflix. And again, that is a distinct advantage if what Netflix has as exclusive content is really, really valuable to a large customer base. All right, so now that we've talked about why economic moats are important, and also some of the major types of economic moats that you will see out in businesses, let's talk about the two-step process that you can go through in order to objectively identify and confirm these kinds of competitive advantages. Because it's one thing just to look at a business and think it has an advantage, but how do we objectively know that it does? And the first step is what's called a qualitative moat analysis. And in this part, we're just coming up with a hypothesis for the advantage that we think a business has. So you want to take your understanding of the business and the industry and that list of major economic moats, and you want to see which ones you can identify in that particular business. Now, at this point, you don't need to be 100% correct. You don't even need to be correct at all. This is just a hypothesis. We're coming up with an opinion, a contention that we're going to confirm later in step 2. So we come up with an opinion. For example, if we continue on with Google, we could could say that, well, in the YouTube platform, which is a major part of their business, they have some kind of networking effect, and in other areas of their business, they have a strong branding moat, an intangible competitive advantage. So that is our hypothesis, and that is what we need to do and write down for our step 1. And then we have step 2, which is where we do a quantitative moat analysis. And this is where we look to the numbers, to the core growth of the business, to see if it shows us that our opinion, our hypothesis is correct. Because at the end of the day, if a business does have distinct advantages over its competitors, then it's going to be consistently drawing in more customers from other businesses, and as a result, generating more revenue, free cash flow, equity, and earnings per share. Those are the key areas that we want to focus on when we're looking at the core growth of a business and seeing if we can confirm that there is some kind of advantage within a business. So the 4 key numbers are revenue or sales, earnings per share, equity, and then we can use for cash flow, we can use either cash flow for owners if you know how to figure that out. I'll leave a link to a video talking about it if you want to learn more about cash flow for owners, but you can also use free cash flow if you prefer. So for Google, let's have a look at these numbers and see what they've been growing at, what rate have they been growing at over the past 10 years. For Google, you can see that they are growing consistently in all areas at a high rate, and this confirms our hypothesis that Google has substantial advantages over other businesses in its industry. So I hope this video provided some clarity in regards to economic moats and competitive advantages and sort of helped you guide you in the right direction when you're going out and working out how to identify these things when you're doing your analysis. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below, positive or negative. I love to hear your feedback and critique. It's always useful for me to be able to improve my videos in the future. And of course, you can let me know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. But if you did enjoy it, as always, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new around here, what are you doing? Hit subscribe, join the team, get educated, get educated. That sounded so aggressive. Anyway, have a good day, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.